Welcome everyone to Charts Free webinar today. Today we welcome Steve Lurch, who is presenting on Innovation is All Around You. Welcome, Steve.
Hello, thank you. Appreciate y'all having me. Hoping everybody can hear me and see my slides and whatnot. I feel like I've done about 1 million virtual presentations to this point, and I've never really had any big significant issues, but it always just kind of feels like it's about to happen. So, fingers crossed. Hopefully this isn't hopefully I didn't just jinx it by saying all that, but yeah, hopefully you can see and hear me. Good afternoon to everybody. I guess we are still good morning to people on the West Coast. I don't know how many West Coasters there might be, but thank you all for having me. Appreciate you all taking the time out of what I assume are very busy days right now for anyone in the hospitality space, working in restaurants and hotels. And so I appreciate you taking the time, appreciate you coming to listen to me talk for a little bit. I will do my best to keep it relatively short and hopefully relatively useful as well. But as Tara said, I'll try to talk for about 30 minutes or so. And then certainly if people have questions, I will take questions all day if people want to chat. But I'll try to keep my part to about 30 minutes. As you just heard, we're going to be talking today about innovation and more specifically how we all can be more innovative, more inventive, move quicker, grow more, do better if we simply find better ways to take advantage of all the ideas and the inspiration and quite literally just the brain power that is already all around us in the form of our many wonderful employees. Like I said, I'll try to keep this semi-short, so apologies if I talk kind of fast. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Steve Lurch. I live just outside Washington, D.C. And I'll think just a little bit about my background, which kind of falls into, I guess you would say, two buckets. For the past 2.5 years, I've been the president and founder of my own sort of small company called Story Arc Consulting. Where I pretty much do three things. I give speeches at conferences and events. Usually I talk about innovation or marketing or consumer behavior or leadership, somewhere in one of those topics. Number two, I guess, I serve as a strategy and marketing consultant to various companies. And third, I lead organizations and teams through usually some sort of workshops and programs around strategic planning, around brainstorming, and around our topic for today, which is innovation and ideation and coming up with new ideas. The other bucket of my background that I guess people usually find more interesting is the decade I spent working for Google, including 5 years out at the headquarters in Mountain View, California, and then another 5 years here in Washington, D.C. My core role at Google was always related to helping clients with digital and marketing strategies, but I also served in another role during my time at Google. I was asked to speak regularly to new employees. We call them Nooglers, so we call ourselves Googlers, and new employees are Nooglers. And it was during their first week at Google, and it was my job essentially to teach them about the philosophies and the culture and really just the history of Google, the way we work together, the way we brainstorm, the way we set goals, really how everything we did or everything we tried to do was in an effort to build the most innovative culture possible. Fortunately for me, or at least I see it as fortunately, I didn't just have Google to learn from. So the stuff I'm going to talk about today is influenced by my work with a lot of different industries and a lot of different businesses. When I started at Google, I got to work with very innovative brands. I was in the tech space. I had clients like GoPro and Roku and Fitbit who were inventing new things and crazy technologies and moving fast. And since then, I've done a bit of everything. I have done some hospitality with groups like the Four Seasons. I've done work for the federal government, which kind of moves at the opposite pace to what GoPro and Roku and Fitbit moved at. I've worked for food brands, for nonprofits. I've worked even in the agriculture space with groups like John Deere and the National Pork Board. So I feel very fortunate, again, to have the opportunity to see how a lot of successful and sometimes unsuccessful companies operate across dozens of different industries, from the Silicon Valley to Capitol Hill. I've worked with small mom and pop startups, and I've worked with Fortune 500 companies. And what I've tried to do over the last decade, both at StoryArc and at Google, is I've tried to pay close attention to the things that work and the things that don't, and to try to figure out the unique differentiators, especially of the companies that are able to move quickly, to be nimble, to constantly be generating new ideas. And just as important as generating those ideas, the companies that can actually activate them. I think working at Google for almost a decade, I believe that Google does this as well as anyone. They're a company that really focuses on this idea of new ideas and of innovation and ingrained in the culture. So definitely going to share some stories and lessons today from Google, but also some general best practices and rules of thumb that I've learned from the best and worst companies I've worked with. Now, I imagine some of you listening today, I didn't look at all the names, I don't know how many people are on right now, but I imagine some of you today were at the conference down in Atlanta 2 months ago. So some of you probably already heard me talk. At that talk, the presentation was called Innovation Through Culture, Stories from a Decade at Google. I talked about these 4 sort of cultural principles that lead to innovation, these 4 key concepts. All these ideas are really closely related, but what I'm really going to focus on today, for those of you that were there 2 months ago, is the first one that I talked about in Atlanta, the idea that innovation comes from anywhere. And in particular, today, we'll talk about how innovation and new ideas can come from your employees. Big if, you take the necessary steps to allow it to happen. So for those of you who saw me speak in September, I think I've only recycled like one story from that presentation. So please bear with me when I start to talk about Richard Montanez, but otherwise I think this should all be all new for everybody, at least I hope. So let me kick things off by talking about Google Maps. I imagine that just about everyone in here uses Google Maps or used Google Maps at some point. I believe it's still the most popular navigation app in the world. If you didn't know, Google Maps was launched in early 2005, February 2005. And at that point, Google's already a publicly traded company, right? It was a while ago, but they're publicly traded. Google is super successful. They've got tons of money, tons of engineers. They've got some real weight to throw behind a new product like Google Maps. So after 3.5 years of Google Maps working, of being in existence, of us expanding, Google still was having trouble in certain parts of the world. These are images from Google Maps from small towns in Pakistan and in the Philippines. These are screenshots from mid to late 2008. So Google Maps has been around for 3.5 years at this point, 3.5 years. And this was common, what you see in these maps, especially again in real rural areas in third world countries. We weren't great at mapping them, and we weren't great at keeping up with the constant changes in roadways and towns and buildings in developing areas and in changing areas, which again, you see a lot in developing nations and third world countries. So this is what a lot of the maps looked like. There were huge chunks of the map that looked like this. So Google decides, and this is in 2008, that even though they have the world's smartest engineers, they've got massive, massive budgets, they've got crazy good technology, they felt like we didn't have the expertise or the knowledge or the skills or whatever it was to do this well enough. So in June of 2008, again, 3.5 years after launch, Google came up with a product called the Google Map Maker API, the Google Map Maker API. They launched it in 2008. And sorry, actually specifically in June of 2008, which is actually when the image here on the left, this image here from Pakistan, is from June of 2008. The Google Map Maker API opened up our mapping software to allow local experts on the ground, people who live in these communities, to actually help contribute to the map, to map their communities for us. And after 3.5 years, this is how good we made these maps after 3.5 years. And then we launched this Map Maker API. And as you'll see, in a course of weeks and months, the people on the ground totally changed and evolved and grew the work that Google had done. It took us 3.5 years to get to the 2 images at the top. And when we launched the Google Map Maker, it took 6 weeks for the Pakistan map to change into that, and took 5 months for the Philippines map to change into that. Even the smartest and most talented people can't be the smartest and most talented at everything. It would have been very easy for Google to say that we've got the best technology, we've got the best engineers, we've got enough money to send enough people to all the corners of the world, but Google didn't say that. They accepted that through help, things could get better, and they could get better faster. Which brings me to the first of the 5 tactics. I think I said that in the title. I'm going to talk about 5 tactics today for driving innovation and new ideas from your employee. And this one tactic, the first one, which I think represents the Google Maps story, is that I would say if you don't do this, if you don't agree with it, it makes everything else I'm going to say today irrelevant. And that first tactic is to commit to humility. If you want to drive ideas from your employees, if you want them to share their thoughts, if you want them to help you improve and grow your business, if you want to find those diamond in the rough ideas, none of that can happen if in the back of your mind, even just in the back of the mind, you're still thinking, I know best. You all in charge, I guess, work in the learning and development space, more or less. And if in the back of your minds, you're thinking, I'm professionally trained in this stuff. I've been doing it for years. There's no way some random waiter or some random concierge or some random person in marketing or finance or HR. There's no way that they could tell me how to do my job better. If in the back of your mind, you're thinking it wouldn't be worth your time to comb through the ideas you'd get from people not in learning and development, then nothing else matters. None of what I'm going to say matters. If you don't want ideas, if you don't value those ideas, you're not going to get any, or at least not in a meaningful way. People will feel that from you. They will read that from you, and not just from you, but from your organization and from your company. You have to accept the idea that you can't be the best at everything all the time. And even if you are, even if you're the best in the world at that thing you do, it doesn't mean that some random idea from someone who has really no idea what you do, it doesn't mean that random idea can't help. Okay, so that's point one. As I said, I spoke with some folks at Chart a couple months ago, and I had the chance to go to Inspire Brands and meet some of those folks. There were a few of them there at the Chart conference. I was on their website, and I found that it says Inspire Brands has around 650,000 employees, which really blew my mind, 650,000 people. That means that Inspire Brands has at their disposal 650,000 brains on any topic, on any challenge, if they choose to activate against it. And I imagine this is probably an anomaly within Chart, that most companies don't have anywhere near this many employees. But it's still true that most companies, most small and medium-sized companies, you still end up in situations where only a fraction of your workforce is responsible for a given task, right? Like you might have 3 people in charge of your marketing and 2 people in charge of creating new recipes, and 3 people in charge of the design and the decor and the organization of your hotel or your lobby or your restaurant. And in most cases, with small and medium-sized companies, that's just a fraction of your company's workforce, right? That's a fraction of your company's brain power. Marketers might have ideas for recipes. The guy at the front desk might have ideas for new ad campaigns. The chef might have ideas for the lobby layout and the decor. We commit to humility by accepting that good ideas can come from anywhere, and really from anyone. Okay, so that's my opening theme. The other 4 points I want to talk about today. I'm talking about getting loud and how that generates idea. I want to talk about the importance of bringing people together in the ideation and brainstorming and creative process. I want to talk about creating innovation infrastructure. And I'll talk about being transparent with your teams and with your employees. So that's our framework. That's our 5 things we're going to talk about. Again, if you don't commit to humility, none of the rest matters. So I'm going to assume, if you all haven't hung up and left the call already, that you are accepting of that fact, that you don't know everything, that maybe there are other good ideas out there. So let's start by talking about this idea of getting loud. And this is another quick story I want to share, and apologize for those folks that were in Atlanta. This is the one repeat story, but I just love this story so much. And I think it really speaks to this concept of driving innovation from anywhere and getting loud about the things you're trying to accomplish, and more specifically, asking for help. So some man named Richard Montanez, he was born a few decades ago outside Los Angeles. He was the son of Mexican immigrants. He and his 10 siblings lived with his parents in a 1-bedroom apartment in a small town outside Los Angeles, where they all grew up picking grapes. That's what they did for a living. And then I think it was in the 70s, Richard had the opportunity to apply for a job as a janitor at a Frito-Lay factory, which was a really big deal at the time. And he had dropped out of high school. He couldn't really speak English that well. So he had someone help him with the application. And he actually got the job. And again, it was a big deal because it paid something like 3 times what he made picking grapes. So Richard's real excited. He gets the job. He works there for years. We fast forward to the 80s. And it comes to this point where Frito-Lay is not really doing that well. Frito-Lay's fallen on some tough times. And the CEO of the company decides to record a video that he wants to be shared with all the employees across all the offices and apparently all the factories as well. And the video simply says that he wants all the employees to feel like they're a true part of this company, like they're owners of this company, like they should feel joy in its successes and they should be pained by its struggles, that they're responsible for new ideas, they're responsible for the growth, that he wants their help. So this video gets distributed, and eventually, somehow, Richard Montanez, the janitor at one of the factories, he sees the video. And he actually happens to have an idea for a product. And being the janitor of a factory who never went to college and never worked at another job, never worked at a company, he doesn't know that it's strange or out of the norm for the janitor at a factory to call up the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. That's exactly what Richard does. He calls up the CEO. He gets a hold of the assistant or the executive assistant, the admin for the CEO, who actually puts him through to the CEO. And he tells the CEO, hey, I've got this idea. I saw your video. CEO says, great. I'm actually going to be out in your area near Los Angeles in like 3 months. Would you put together a little pitch, a little presentation, a little speech for me and my leadership team of your idea? I want to hear it. So Richard's excited. He goes home, he buys a little $3 clip-on tie, he rents a book on marketing from the library and memorizes a few sentences. And he goes home and he makes a snack that he was trying to invent. He thought his idea was for a snack product that he felt would better represent his Hispanic heritage, better speak to Hispanic consumers. He gets little Ziploc bags, he doodles a little logo on it, and he goes in and he pitches this idea to the CEO of Frito-Lay and to the leadership team. And today, thanks to that pitch, thanks to Richard Martinez, the world has Flaming Hot Cheetos, which Adweek will tell you is the most popular snack food in America for the last 3 years in a row. We're talking hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue from a product that was created by a janitor who got a pitch with the CEO of a major Fortune 500 company. And I love that story. And I think Richard is very inspirational. And I talked about that idea of a diamond in the rough idea earlier. And this certainly feels like that kind of thing, like a once in a lifetime idea. So random, so fortunate, so lucky. And I think Richard is a real inspiration for doing this. And he's now an executive vice president at PepsiCo, one of the largest companies in the world, which is a pretty amazing story from the kid who got a job as a janitor when he didn't speak English. And I think there's a lot we can learn from Richard, but there's also a lot we can learn from the CEO of Frito-Lay, the CEO who simply recorded a video asking for help from his employees, a CEO who, when he got a phone call from a janitor, was willing to take the meeting and then took an actual pitch from a janitor and brought his team and listened to those ideas and then took the idea seriously. It is so important and so valuable to simply ask for help. And not enough leaders do it. Not enough leaders actually spend the time to say, hey, all of you employees, I'm open to your ideas. I'm open to your help. I want you to help. It's not to say you need to take calls and meetings with every person who walks off the street and wants to pitch to you, or that your CEO should. But I know in this case, in the case of Frito-Lay, that this one pitch from this one janitor, that one phone call, it's certainly paid tenfold over the time it would have taken that CEO to take 10,000 meetings. So it can be worth it. It can be worth it. And it starts with asking for help. And that's the first part of getting loud. Ask for help. The second part is about sharing your problems, and obviously kind of related here. But another things that innovative teams and companies, I think, do really well is that they share their problems. It kind of goes back to this idea of humility, I think. But most people do not like talking about the things they don't know the answer to, the things they don't know how to do, about the problems they're facing that they're not sure how to solve. And this is especially true at larger organizations, larger companies, where we end up with different divisions, different job functions that sit in silos that often don't talk to each other. And when those departments do get together to talk to each other, when we have big group meetings, big company-wide presentations, what do these organizations talk about? They talk about their successes. They talk about what went well. They talk about their, which is great. And it's good to share those things too. But we very rarely share our challenges and our problems. Marketing doesn't tell sales their problems. Purchasing doesn't tell operations their problems. And rarely do executives take the time to share their problems, their challenges, their issues with the frontline workers. We don't tell them what we're struggling with. Sharing problems isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of confidence and strength. It's a sign of humility. And it's a sign that you care more about getting things done and doing a good job than you care about looking good or about who gets credit. Create opportunities for different people in different job functions to know the challenges you're facing, to know the challenges each other are facing. Get people talking. Again, get loud by asking for help. Get loud by sharing your problems. And the one other thing I'll say about this idea of getting loud is this concept of setting the tone. Asking for help and sharing problems is super important. They're great starting points for driving more innovation, for getting people more involved. It's a big part of this getting loud concept. But it's also just a starting point, because when you're talking about changing the culture of an organization, truly showing your people that you have a real, genuine desire for innovation and for new ideas, for their help, it has to be a never-ending conversation. The topic has to become consistent and a repeating part of what you do. Think about the things you do on a regular basis, annual reports, or monthly staff meetings, or weekly or performance reviews, or maybe employees are having one-on-one meetings on a weekly basis or monthly basis with their manager or some form of leadership. Making innovation, making ideation, making having a conversation about new ideas and challenges and asking for help, making those a part of those processes is hugely important. Carving out the time to actually do it is hugely important. If you want to change the culture, it has to be ongoing. Probably wondering why there's a picture of Shark Tank, which is related to this. And that is to say that, yes, it needs to be ongoing. Yes, you should ask for help. Yes, you should share your problems. But when you want the culture to change, a lot of times it also helps to start in a big and exciting way. If you're asking for people to change the way they work, to change the way they do business, sometimes it starts with something loud and publicizable that people will pay attention to. And I've seen so many companies coming up with these Shark Tank style programs, these pitch competitions, these idea competitions, allowing their frontline workers, allowing any of their workers, blue collar, white collar, exec, new employees, interns, to come up with ideas and to pitch them. And the best companies, the smartest companies, are making a whole big hullabaloo about this stuff, right? They're publicizing it. There's prizes. They're sharing it with all the other employees. They're talking about it. They've got their CEOs sitting on the judging panels. They're filming it like a real episode of Shark Tank. Sometimes when you want to change the culture, yes, it has to be ongoing and forever, but sometimes a good starting point is just getting people excited. Get people excited about this idea of bringing their ideas to the table. Make it exciting, make it fun, make it rewarding, have prizes, anything you can do to get people to care, to pay attention, and to see that you care about this sort of cultural change. So ask for help. Share your problems, and set the tone by kicking things off in an exciting way and making it a constant and all-encompassing part of the way you do business. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Again, I'm going to try and keep the time as best I can. It's about bringing people together. In addition to working in the strategy and leadership and innovation spaces that I'm talking about right now, the rest of my work over the last decade or so has been in the marketing world. I don't know how many of you have ever worked in marketing or do anything in advertising right now, but if you've ever worked in that space at a media agency or a creative agency or even in-house marketing for a company, you know that 9 out of 10 times, this is how ideas come to life. Clients develop some sort of creative brief, some sort of high-level plan or goal, or just some focus for the next year or next quarter. They take that plan, they take that brief, and they share it with all their agencies and all their vendors, which often included people like me when I worked at Google. And then each group, the media agency, the PR agency, the creative team, the Google team, the Facebook team, they go back to their offices with the brief, they go back to their own little teams, and they work on it. They brainstorm on it. They come up with new ideas and new concepts. And then over the course of weeks, they polish it up, they turn it into a formal proposal, and they bring it back to the client, and each group presents what they've come up with. And that's fine. And again, that's how 9 out of 10 companies do it. But the other one time, the path that the more innovative companies take is that they don't send everyone back into their corner to do the brainstorming part. They all brainstorm together. They brainstorm out loud. One of the greatest possible accelerants to driving new ideas and new innovations is getting people comfortable sharing all of their ideas, not just the fully polished ones, the fully prepped ones, not just the best ideas, but also sharing their half-baked ideas, also sharing their crazy ideas, their ideas that are unrealistic, their ideas that might seem impossible because they have no idea how to bring it to life or how to make it a reality. Because so often it's hearing someone else say something crazy that will trigger a different thought in someone else's mind. And then they'll say that out loud and it triggers something else in someone else's mind. I lead a lot of strategic planning workshops and brainstorming workshops, mostly for boards of directors and leadership teams for different companies. And the best exercises we do are always the ones where we force people to come up with as many ideas as possible, silly ideas, crazy ideas. And then we force them to share them out loud, no matter what, share them with the team, and then build off of them together, make them better together. Brainstorming should be a team sport. It brings more ideas to light and it makes those ideas better. Another way that Google drives innovation from employees, and I'll go back to my Google time for this one, is to enable as much cross-functional collaboration as possible. And one way they do it is through something called 20% time or 20% projects, which I think I mentioned when I was down in Atlanta. It's essentially this idea that all Googlers, again, Googlers, are supposed to be able to take up to 20% of their time to work on whatever they want, whatever they think can help Google, whatever they're passionate about. And it's a great way to keep employees happy, right? It generates some great work because people are working on things that excite and that energize them. But it's also this huge catalyst for collaboration at Google, for bringing ideas to life and getting multiple people involved, sharing those ideas across function, across team. Because what tends to happen with 20% projects is that someone from like the Android team would say, I want to work on virtual reality. That's my passion. That's my project. And then someone from YouTube says, that's my passion too. And someone from the legal team and the search team and the Chrome team, they all are passionate about virtual reality too. So now this group comes together and you've got 6 people who never would have met, never would have worked together, and come from backgrounds, come from teams with their own best practices, their own experiences, their own tools, their own way of doing things. And in an ideal world, they built some amazing virtual reality project, right? Like that's the dream scenario for a 20% project. But even if they don't, what we've now created at Google is this shared learning experience where now the YouTube guy can go back to his team and say, oh, I learned about this cool coding tool from some lady on the Android team. And I learned that the legal team, they have this neat trick for making their weekly staff meetings more productive. Very few people will suggest you take Google's model as it is and give your employees 1 day a week to do whatever they want. I'm not suggesting that. But it is very easy and very practical and very doable to create more situations where people are working cross-team and cross-function, where people are collaborating that never would have met, that never would have been able to share insights and share the way they do things. If you want to read more about this 20% idea, it's a really interesting philosophy, and it's changed and grown a lot over time. There's a lot of cool articles about it. There's one from Inc. and one from Forbes that I find especially interesting. But again, at Google, it's less about the amount of time given, and it's more about getting that collaboration. Because I learned during my time at Google, even things like the way Google's cafeterias are designed, in some cases, they're actually designed to force employees to wait in line for food because they want those random interactions between people standing in line, those random conversations. It's the same way the break rooms are set up and the cafeteria tables and chairs are set up to force people to talk, to force people to meet, to force people to share with each other, especially people who are coming together from different backgrounds and different places. One more thing I'll talk about here in this sort of category of bringing people together. This is a very specific program that happened at Google. Don't analyze this picture too much. This is just a random thing that popped up when I looked for CRM systems, I believe was my Google image search. Google had this program where when people had ideas, they wanted to be able to connect those people with the right resources, with the right understanding, with people that could help. So there's this program called Immersion Day. We call it Immersion Day because it was a 1 day a year kind of thing. And it's a program that allowed people like me, people in marketing and sales, and basically non-engineering functions. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to program. It allowed people like me to look at a problem, look at a tool, look at a website or a platform that we use and say, I have questions about it. I have suggestions for it. I think it would be better X, Y, and Z. And in particular, one year, I had a lot of thoughts on Google's internal CRM system, our customer relationship manager system, which Google had sort of built. It was our own proprietary system. I put that in the immersion program. I said, this is what I want to learn about. This is what I want to work on. So Google connected me with an engineer who helped to code that tool. And we sat down together for several hours. And I explained to him how I'm using it as a salesperson, the challenges I face, the ideas I have. And he was able to explain back to me what is and isn't possible, what they can and can't change, why things are the way they are. And the hope being I would leave him with some suggestions for how we might be able to make that product better. But again, it was someone I never would have met in a million years. It helped me to share my ideas with the relevant people. It helped me to better understand how my ideas fit into the broader scheme and the broader sort of the world of Google, and bring together the sales and engineering side, the marketing and engineering side. Again, not something you necessarily have to do as a full day experience, but help people connect those dots. A lot of people at your company have ideas about some random other area. And if they never meet someone who truly understands it, who truly can teach them about it and show them about it, then that idea is just going to dwindle away in the back of their head until it disappears. Bring those people together. I kind of already talked about this, but bringing people together. This idea that you've got waiters and you've got chefs and you've got maids and you've got executives, and they all are doing very different things. There's no reason to think that one can't have an idea about what something else does. And far too often they never talk. They never get together. Find ways to make that happen. Find ways to bring them together. So I go to, again, just to recap that, brainstorming should be done in groups. Brainstorming should be done out loud. As many cross-functional projects as you can have, and even to set up very specific programs to force that cross-functional nature to happen. 20% projects were great because they kind of happened organically at Google. We were given the time to pursue those things. But things like Immersion Day, super specific, connecting people with the relevant mentors for their idea, for their category, for the thing they want to explore, can be a very small amount of time commitment, a relatively easy fix, but it could bring out some great ideas, and it can really empower your employees to show them that you care about their ideas and you want to connect the dots for them. So we'll go to number 4, create innovation infrastructure. I always think about this idea, and you've probably heard this before, this idea that so many of people's best ideas happen in the shower. I feel like that's something that is commonly talked about. And that has something to do with this idea that part of your brain gets distracted by this routine activity of taking a shower. And the creative side of your brain is free to sort of float around and think about different things. And I always felt about those eureka moments, I guess, that happen in the shower. And it definitely is true. And it's a great concept and it is a reality. But I think a lot of times for businesses, because of sort of the nature of creativity, we tend to think a lot of the outside the box thinking, the creative thinking, the weird thinking, the ideation, that it kind of happens in the background, that it kind of happens at random times, that it can't be scheduled. It's just sort of something that happens in your mind. And because of that, we don't really put a focus on it. But you can't rely on this happening, right? Because that's just not the way it works for everyone, especially when you're trying to draw ideas out of employees, maybe your frontline workers, let's say, who might not live, sleep, and breathe your business the way you do, right? You've got new employees, you've got temporary workers. And I'm sure every business has at least some people who are just there for the paycheck, and that's it. They might not be thinking about your business, even in the side of their brain, the creative side of the brain, when they're taking a shower. And for that reason, oftentimes we need to set up very specific infrastructure, very specific paths to make sure this creativity, this ideation, this brainstorming process happens. You got to make coming up with new ideas and being creative, make it consistent and make it a regular part of the job, just as we will make anything else. Every business is different, but think to yourself, could we set aside 5 minutes, I don't know, at the beginning of people's shifts for our frontline workers to ask them to just brainstorm on random topics, to come up with new ideas, to think outside the box? What about our corporate workers? Could they take 30 minutes once a week to go into a room by themselves or with a couple other people and just brainstorm new ideas, think about certain things, but it's always scheduled. It's every Tuesday at 10:30 or whatever it is, because we actually set aside the time to be creative. We set aside the time for new ideas. And it's the same thing with sharing the ideas. We probably got weekly staff meetings. Maybe the first 5 minutes of every meeting should be an open floor for new ideas. And everyone knows if you've got new ideas, that's when you share them. What about employees having one-on-ones with their boss? Could a part of that meeting, could a part of that conversation be sharing new things? Could it be brainstorming together on new topics? Can we make that a regular part of the day, just as we would have any other part of the job? Sometimes we have to give people the license to think differently for some amount of time on some consistent schedule, because we can't just assume it's going to happen, because for a lot of people, it doesn't. And we can't assume that like the Richard Montanez Cheeto example works, where a CEO just saying, hey, does anybody have any ideas? And we're so fortunate that a janitor took it upon himself to call the CEO of the company. That won't work in most cases, right? That's not always going to be the case, even if you make a video and share it like that, which is, again, a great starting point. But in most cases, that janitor who has that idea, he'll have no idea what to do with his idea. He won't know what the next steps are. He won't know if he should call the CEO or who he should call. So many people just sit on their ideas, possibly good or great ideas, because they don't know what to do with it. It can be very intimidating. It could be embarrassing. It can be awkward to walk up to your boss or some other person you work with and say, hey, I've got this crazy idea. It has nothing to do with my job, but I got this crazy idea. So a lot of people just don't do it. And innovation infrastructure means building the necessary mechanisms to collect and organize and process and share those ideas. And it's those words like mechanisms and organize and collect that some people don't attach to brainstorming. They don't attach to creativity, but you have to. And it can be super simple, right? It can be as simple as an email address. That whenever somebody has an outside the box idea or a creative idea, this is where those ideas go to. So that person knows if I'm sending an idea to that email address, not only do I know where to send it, but I know that the person reading these emails, they get weird ideas. They get outside the box ideas. Mine isn't strange. It's not weird that I'm doing this. This is what it's for. Or assign a specific person. And again, I think innovation and new ideas is everyone's responsibility. I'm not saying someone should be in charge of it, but having a clear path you can go to with your ideas. If you're at this restaurant, if you're at this hotel, if you're in this region, this is a person you go to when you want to talk through something outside the box, out of the scope of your role. When you want to know if something's possible, if there's budget available to build something new, if there's resources available to try something new, a set email, a set person can make all the difference. And again, I'll give you an example from the Google days. And again, don't worry about this screenshot. This is another one of my Google image searches for message board. But at Google, we had a message board where we could share ideas. I think it was called Light Bulb or something like that, where people could just post random ideas they had, and people could vote on them. People could upvote the ideas that they thought were the best. It was a way for all of us to sort of see what other people are thinking, for us to prioritize what made sense, for leadership and management to sort of get a sense of what the employees think is really valuable. It was a really cool project. It was a really cool platform. And you can go a step further with this, right? Like you could very easily take some very rudimentary voting system, message board, and actually incentivize, right? Whoever gets the most votes gets X, or the top 3 ideas each year, we will actually bring to the CEO or whatever, the president, the owner, and actually work through these ideas and talk through these ideas and these opportunities. So don't assume brainstorming ideation just happen in the background. Make it formal, make it consistent, and create very clear pathways for this stuff to come to life. Don't take for granted that a good idea is going to find its way to the light, because most of the time, I would say they probably don't. It can be as simple as an email address, but do something to create that path. Last one, be transparent. And I'll start with the concept of giving credit. Not a lot of things are more demotivating than feeling like you don't get credit or recognition for the work that you're doing. I think probably everyone would agree with that. So of course, the opposite end of that is true, right? It feels great when you are given credit, when you're given recognition, when people celebrate you for your work, for your ideas. And when you're trying to create a culture of innovation, it's not just about celebrating someone's idea, it's about showing everyone else that you're celebrating that person's idea, making sure everyone knows that their coworker got credit, that their coworker did something outside the box, something special, and that leadership noticed it and cared and they rewarded it. When I was in middle school, I used to go to this carnival once a year. And there was this one year where I played that milk jug game, and threw the balls to the milk jug, and I'm sure it's rigged. And I just got really lucky one year, and I won an electric scooter from the milk jug game. And what happens when you win an electric scooter at the dumb little carnival in your town is they don't just hand you the electric scooter. In fact, they spend the next 10 minutes on a megaphone trying to get people to come around to watch you be presented with your electric scooter, which when you're 13 or whatever that was the coolest thing in the world. And obviously, in this case, it's a sales tactic, right? They want everyone to see that it's possible to win the scooter so that other people will fork over their money for a shot at the prize. But it's the exact same concept with getting your staff to fork over their ideas. You got to show them that they can win. You got to show them that their ideas get celebrated. You got to show them that other people have brought up crazy ideas. And not only were they celebrated, not only were they recognized, but that those ideas went somewhere. That there have been times where some waiter said something and it actually came to life. It actually passed through to management and to leadership and actually got activated. And not just celebrating the success either. We have to share the entire journey with people. You've probably seen this line chart before. They do it with a lot of things. I've seen a lot of times for success, that success is not a straight line. It looks like this. We need to be open to sharing that part of the journey with people too, understanding that, hey, when new ideas come to life, this is what they go through to try and happen. This is why that idea that your coworker had didn't come to reality. These are the challenges we faced. These are the issues we faced. This is why it didn't happen, or this is why it did happen. This is why it's taking 5 years to do. Be transparent with the process. It educates people on what's going on at your company. It shows that you respect them by sharing the journey. At Google, we had this program called TGIF. It used to be every Friday, although they eventually switched it to Thursdays, where every Friday, the founders of the company would get up on stage and just talk about some specific project that was going on at Google, something that a lot of times wasn't public yet, wasn't something that was launched yet, things we wouldn't know about otherwise. But they just wanted to share with us what was happening, what the process was, what they were working on, what they were trying to solve for. It was a really cool experience, really empowering, really exciting. And then we got to ask questions. Everyone got to ask questions of the founders of the company. This picture on the left, that's me a long time ago, my first week at Google. And that's Larry Page, the founder of Google. They connected with us. They shared the entire company. They shared the journey. They shared the process. And it allowed us to see that ideas do go somewhere and ideas have a purpose. And then if I bring ideas to the table, they could become a reality. So be transparent. Make sure you give credit and give credit publicly, and make sure you share the journey, not just the good parts, not just the bad parts, but especially if someone shares an idea and everybody knows about it. Let's say it was a Shark Tank thing or it got upvoted in the online tool that I was talking about. If that idea never happens and people just see it never happen, that can be very demotivating. But if they understand the work that went into it and the effort that was made and why it didn't happen, then that's a very different conversation. So I'll sum it all up. Commit to humility. Again, you can't be the best at everything. Get loud. If you want ideas, if you've got problems, don't hide it. Bring people together whenever possible. Let them brainstorm out loud. Let them work with people from other parts of the company. Create the infrastructure so that it feels normal, so that it feels easy, so that it's expected and consistent, this whole ideation process. And make sure that it's transparent, as I just talked about. Make sure you celebrate and give credit. So that's pretty much it. I think I was a little bit longer than I intended. I think it was about 35 minutes. But thank you all for taking the time. I think I probably still have a little time for questions, if that's okay with Tara. I think there's still probably time. At least I know I can hang out. But also, here's my email. Here's my website. I've got a LinkedIn. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to talk one-on-one, if you've got questions you don't want to ask out loud or that are really specific to your company or your team. I'm always more than happy to chat about any of this kind of stuff. So with that, again, I'll just say thank you very much for listening to me, for taking the time. And yeah, if there's any questions.
I have two questions, and I'll start with those. Anyone else that has any questions that want to send them into the chat, you're welcome to. We had the first one was any recommendations for a first step, especially those of us at larger companies with dozens or hundreds of employees. Where would you begin when you're trying to change the culture?
Okay. So I think I got that. So yeah, I think there's so many different things you can do. I know I talked to a lot of things, some very specific, some more general, some tactical steps you can take, some just sort of mindsets you have to shift. I think I laugh about it because it sounds so cliche now, it sounds so corny now, but the Shark Tank idea is, and it doesn't have to be Shark Tank, but this idea of competitions, this idea of sort of a publicized event with the theme around innovation, the theme around new ideas, where you are actively going out and marketing it to your staff, where you're saying, hey, we're doing this big thing, making as big of a deal about it as you can. I think those types of things are real tone setters for the organization. I think those types of things are the things that get people excited and get people to pay attention to the conversation. I talked a lot about this idea that these conversations have to keep happening, have to become normalized. You have to keep repeating what you want and what your problems are and what you need help with. But if you'll be able to pay attention to those conversations, starting in any sort of exciting way is huge. Giving away prizes, making it a contest, letting people vote, letting people watch, getting leadership involved. I always use Shark Tank as the example because I've seen a lot of companies do internal Shark Tanks, but any sort of fun, exciting first step is a great first step. And then from there, it's laying in the infrastructure, I think, and start building out the online tools or setting up the email address or having those conversations in weekly meetings, whatever it might be. But I think start exciting. I think it's the coolest way to do it. I think it's the most fun way to do it. I think it's the way to get your employees the most excited about it. Does that make sense? I hope that answers that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more question that came in the chat, and anyone else, if you want it to be taken off mute, I think you just have to raise your hand and I can take you off mute if you want to talk to Steve at the end. But the second question I have is, do people really take 20% of their time off at Google to work on other things, and how do managers deal with people taking 20% off of their time off?
Yeah. I think when I talk about 20% time is when people you think I'm crazy the most, because again, I'm not saying that other people should try to follow Google's model. Google's in a very fortunate position, right? Google has a really big, really successful company with lots of money. So that affords the opportunity to sort of experiment and go outside the box. I think I talked about this in Atlanta, but not here, this idea that, yes, a lot of 20% projects were little tiny things that no one ever heard of. But that's also how Gmail and Google Maps both got invented. They both got invented by people in 20% projects. And I say the same thing about that as I said with the Cheeto example, that Gmail and Google Maps alone would have paid for the time spent doing every other 20% project ever, right? And obviously you can't count on that. And it helps if you're a big company that can afford to sort of put some time in and some resources in early until it pays off. But I think it's also for each individual team and each individual manager to explore. We used to joke that in sales, we didn't feel like we really got 20% time. We felt like we got 120% time because we had clients, we had advertisers we were responsible for. We couldn't just say to them, oh, I'll respond later because I'm working on this virtual reality project as a hobby, right? That's not how it works. So we still had to get our jobs done. But it was just sort of this cultural theme, this cultural acceptance, even though some managers probably didn't love it. coming from the highest level of Google, someone is saying, we encourage you to explore your passions. We encourage you to think outside the box, to spend time doing other things. It wasn't always easy to do. I'm sure some managers didn't like it, but just setting that tone, again, I keep just saying setting the tone, but setting the tone at the highest levels, it made it much more acceptable and much more common. And then it's for each individual and each individual team and manager to sort of tactically work through it, whether that means, do I spend 1 hour a day on this stuff? Do I take 1 day a week to do it? Do I take 1 week per quarter where I just work on this stuff? There's a lot of different versions of 20% time and 20% projects at Google. And again, I say this for every company I work with. No one's expecting you to give your employees 1 day a week to do whatever. But could you give them an hour a week? Could you give them 30 minutes a week? Could you give them some small amount of time? I don't know, probably, maybe. Some of your employees could probably do stuff like that, and who knows what could come out of it. So hopefully that more or less answers that.
That does. Okay, I think that's all for our questions. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. For everyone else, this is recorded and it will be on our website later today if you want to share it with anyone else.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again. I appreciate having me, Tara, and appreciate everybody hanging in.
All right. Bye, everyone.